What's up guys, and welcome back. Today we are finally going to do something. I know I talked a lot of crap about the front suspension on this motorcycle in the last video, and really I hadn't even done the first most important thing that you could do to your front forks or your shocks or whatever, which is simply to swap out the fork oil. So today we are going to pull the forks off this motorcycle. We are going to dump out the old fluid. I'll show you guys how to put on the new fluid and obviously put this thing back together. From my understanding and all the research I could possibly do on this thing, these stock forks, the Yamaha 01 fluid that's in them is technically about a 5-weight fluid. So I'm hoping that by bumping up kind of 2 bumps, because I believe there's usually kind of like a 2.5, a 5, a 7, you can get a 10, a 15, a 20. So all of those are just kind of a heavier weight oil. And today we are going to try and see if we can put a 10 in here and see how that goes for us. So we're kind of skipping 7.5 and we're going to 10. I'm hoping, like I said, to get a little more rebound out of this motorcycle. And if we can get that, or at least get the tension knob to do something for me, I think would be really cool. If we can kind of get into a realm of my weight and being able to adjust it a little bit, I think that'd be awesome. So that's what we're going to do today. Let's get her done. So before we get into the stand to pick up the motorcycle to get the tire off, because I actually have a different version of the stand that we're going to need versus the one I've been using in the past, we do need our 14mm hex key, and we want to break loose our front axle here so that we don't have to deal with that when we're up in the air. Out of these 2 front stands, I've been using the one on the left there, which is from Trackside. It has basically some rubber pads on the bottom that will roll with the motorcycle front forks to help you pick up the motorcycle, which is great for replacing tires, maybe some track days. Very simple, just need to get the bike off the ground, swap out the tire, and maybe do a few the brake adjustments or whatever you're going to do. That's a good stand for it. Now with what we're doing today, we actually need something a little bit different, and you can tell that there's this little pin on the front of this front stand that basically goes into the bottom of our triple tree, and it picks up our motorcycle from the triple tree instead of the bottom of the forks. Now we're going to need something like this simply because removing the forks, we're going to need to be able to not support the motorcycle by the forks. So I'll link both of these down below. If this job is something you're doing, this is definitely what you're going to need. In addition to that, the next thing we're going to do is put an Olin steering damper on this motorcycle, and it does mount at the bottom in between the triple tree, which means we also have to take the fork off again to do the Olin's steering damper. So if you're looking at doing stuff like that for the future of your motorcycle, this R7, then you will need a front stand similar to this. So you could see that little hole at the bottom there. I've actually pulled the rubber plug out already, but the motorcycle does come with a little rubber plug right where that hole is, that is essentially to pick up your motorcycle with this stand. So we'll go ahead and do so right now. Now this stand, when you buy it, it actually comes with a whole bunch of different pins, as a lot of motorcycles are different sized. So fairly simple to do. We just stick the biggest pin on this stand, put it in that triple tree piece there, and that's going to help us lift up the whole front of the motorcycle and support only by the triple tree. All right, so the axle's broke. The next thing to really go for, get the brakes done, get those out of the way. On the brake calipers here, we have these 2 12mm bolts that have to come out. We'll just break those loose, zip them out. And now we could just simply pull back and get our brake out of the way. On the right side here, we're a little more involved because we still have ABS installed here. So we do have this 4mm hex bolt that is holding our ABS sensor on there. So we'll go ahead and remove that bolt, pull the sensor out, and just leave it hanging there. We'll hit up these 2 nuts on the brake caliper. Pull those guys out. And don't forget, there's this bracket up top here. That's what's holding our ABS in place. The wire itself. Lift up, there we go. Now we got the other brake out of the way. We still have this 6mm pinch bolt to get off. We don't need to remove it, we just need to loosen it. And that's it. And last thing to do, get our axle completely out. It tries to stay in there a little bit, but you can always just grab the top of the tire here, slide it out. There goes the axle. What's important to note is to not lose these two spacers. So we'll take that one out. We got this spacer on this side, take it out, and our front tire is removed. Next thing on the agenda is going to be to get our front fender off of the motorcycle. Well, maybe not necessarily off the motorcycle as much as get it off of the forks. So we have these two bolts here. Got this one here. There we go. There's those two. Oh, we don't want to lose those spacers. Those spacers actually go on the inside of the plastic here and they keep the fairing from breaking. So we'll come back to this side. Spin that front slightly. The other one up top here. And then it looks like these spacers just fall right out. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab them up before I lose them. And at this point, there is nothing left that is holding our fairing to the forks. All right, next thing, not maybe necessary, but I believe it's going to be easier for us to see inside. So we are going to remove these two side fairings right here, which this is a 4mm hex key. Don't lose the plastic. We also have these pop pins, which you just push in. There's two of them up front and one of them here on the gas tank. Once you push them in, you can pull them out quite easily. And then at that point, we can just slide forward, lift up, and we'll have a little bit more room and be able to see the bolts for our fork tube. So we'll do that on the other side as well. We got this one here we'll take off. Two more little pop pins. And the 4mm hex key does okay for popping them in. We'll slide forward, pull this guy out of the play. So the next thing we're going to want to do, and mainly because I don't actually have the appropriate tools, is we're going to want to loosen the top of our forks, and these are a 24mm. So those are actually on there quite tight. So 6mm will loosen our top triple tree here. Let's see if I can get a little less bind on those threads, because that is really, really tight. Hopefully this will be enough pressure removed from the top of the fork to allow us to get these things off. Like I said, these caps are on there really, really tight. Those we really need to loosen. So these need to be 100% perfect, especially if you're doing what I'm doing, which is utilizing a 12 point instead of a 6 point on something like this. But it does look like loosening these tom clamps was 100% necessary. I've already sort of slightly stripped this top one because I didn't do that. Huge difference, guys. You have to loosen that top clamp of the triple tree before you can loosen these shocks. Definitely a good learning lesson there. Luckily, you got to learn it from me versus learning it yourself. That will ultimately drive me mad having that little slightly stripped out bolt there, but we got them off. They're good and loose. Now with the fork off, we should be able to remove those very easily. The next thing to go for is the horn here. We actually have a zip tie on the fork that's going to need to come off. So to be very careful not to scratch the tube. So now you can see we can get at these two bolts down here, which is what's going to release our fork tube. We still do have to remove our clip-ons to get this thing off. So that will be our next step, which is we have another 6mm down here that is going to loosen our clip-on clamp. Those are in there pretty good and most likely Loctite. So be careful with them. Make sure the wrench is all the way in there. I can do them with my fingers. We'll get this one on this side. And what's neat about these stock ones is the fact that there's actually these little caps up here and additional bolts. I love picks. Of course, I will link a lot of these weird tools that I have that a lot of you guys probably don't know about or maybe don't know about. They're great for working on your stuff. So we'll get those little caps off of there. Looks like 5mm for these top ones. Yep, they are definitely on there pretty good. can actually see our clip-ons lowering. There's the second one. So we are back to a 6mm on those. And it looks like there should be enough room to torque all this too, which is cool. Loosening up fairly easy. You know, these aren't on there all that tight. And the reason for that is you go too tight and you don't torque these right, you are going to smash the fork tube, and then you'll have even more issues than a shock oil situation. Now we don't need to take them all the way out. Just get them nice and loose. All right, now we should just simply be able to slide our fork out. It's kind of binding up here a little bit. Just got to figure out what is getting us to bind. What I believe is binding us is a sticker, and it is. It's a sticker on the fork tube. As we're trying to slide it out, it's actually hitting this little protective sticker. So we're going to have to remove this sticker. So you can see it is like a nice, almost like a zag that we used to put on our phones. So once again, because we haven't removed the fork and we don't want it scratching up too bad, we're gonna, there we go, everything is officially off. And now we have the first fork out. And of course we have loosened this cap enough so that we can finish taking it off and dumping all this fluid out. We'll have to pump this a couple of times to get all of the fluid out. We'll measure all the fluid, and then we'll put in that 10 weight, the same exact amount. Let's see if I can show you guys the way this fork reacts and why I don't like it. So as I take this fork and apply pressure from the top, you can see it just lunges up. That is what's driving me crazy about this fork. In my opinion, it should have some slow lag coming back up, and it has absolutely none, and it doesn't matter what I do with tension. Very annoying. I'm really hoping to see the difference when we put the 10 weight in there. I'm hoping that we get a little bit nice, slower rebound. All right, now for the fun stuff, we need to get all this fluid out. I have kind of wiped down the fork just a little bit just to get some of the junk off of it, but we should be able to use our 24mm to loosen this guy up just enough, which will allow this rod to slide down. So if you notice how it kind of sticks like that. So this is watching some of Dave Moss's stuff. So we've got what, almost 9,000 miles on this motorcycle. We have not done any fork maintenance whatsoever. So you can see how it kind of sticks a little bit. That just means the grease that's in this seal is a little weak. So we will be doing that today too, because you can see how it kind of sticks in certain areas and pops. We'll do that at the end. This is just a crappy little cup that we are going to pour all of our fork oil in and then see how much, so that we know that we can dump out our fork oil, and we'll do the exact amount of oil that came out is what we're going to put back in. So let's get to going. There we go. So I'll stop at that. And then to get some of the rest of the fluid out of the shock, we actually have to pump it multiple times to force that fluid out, which will in turn provide us with more fluid to come out. I'll go ahead and tighten this guy back down so it doesn't, if there is any more coming out, it won't leak all over my table. Just take a marker and mark about where the fluid was. Fill back up to here and then refill our shock. This Maxima stuff was spoken highly of for everything I saw. So that's what we took out. And that's what we're gonna put back in. So hopefully this isn't a pain in the ass, but we do need to pour it very, very slowly. And you can hear it getting all those bubbles out of there. Go ahead and pump it a few times, make sure it's getting the bubbles out. Getting the fluid wherever it needs to go in there. All right. Oh yeah, you can feel the change already. Yeah. I don't know if you guys could notice that, but we are getting much less lunging back up. It's not trying to jump off the ground anymore, so it is a definite change. That is number one. Last thing really to do here, guys, is we're gonna mess with that seal and we're gonna re-grease it. I believe the easiest way to do this is gonna be with some kind of door trim tool. These are very inexpensive. I have linked them in the past for different things, but really a screwdriver or flathead will work. And all we're trying to do is get this seal, or at least the outside rubber piece here, to separate like that from the fork. There we go, just a little bit of oil here, or I'm sorry, grease. And we're going to run it around the outside right here. And the point for that is so that seal will pick up all that lube. And allow it to work much better, like so. And you can tell it picked up all the grease. It's all in there. So very cool. Slide this guy back in play. We'll go around the seal and make sure it's seated all the way back in there. And I say, this fork is done and ready to go. Go ahead and put this one back on the bike real quick and we'll pull the other one off. Get it going through like so. We'll make sure that our clip-on is going back on. Just kind of keep weaseling until we get it up there. From here, I am just going to lightly tighten that so it doesn't fall out. And then something we didn't do when we removed it in the first place is we didn't measure. So we'll run it back down where it is. Measure it one more time. And that's about right on. And that's like 7 millimeters. From the bottom of this triple tree to the top of this clamp is what I'm getting. So we're gonna make sure that this one is put on the same way. Now for this side of the clamp, come back over here and get these two loosened up. Plenty of room in here, I'd say, to do this. All right, we got them loose, and the whole thing is just sliding out as we speak. This guy should just keep on coming on out pretty easy. And she's out. Here is round two. We'll test this guy out and see. Technically, this shock feels much better than the other one. All right, same procedure as the other one. We'll quickly take our top cap off. So we'll check this one as well. See, there's a little, it's sticking there a little bit down there and on the way up. So we will relube this seal as well. But go ahead and start dumping. All right. Give her a couple of pumps. Make sure everything is out. See if we get anything else out of here. Give her another pump. You could definitely feel there's no resistance anymore, which is kind of cool. Well, it's like you know now that most of the fluid is pretty much out of there. And it's pretty much was like the same amount of fluid, maybe just a tad bit less. And we're dripping now, so go ahead and get her all cleaned up. Get this top back on a little bit so it doesn't come leaking out on the bench. And like I said, we're just barely off of what we were before. There we go. Almost this full jug, which is cool because we got a little bit left in here. So now we know that one jug is going to get her done. Get our fork off there. Slowly dump her on in. Alright, remember these little trim tools, perfect for getting this seal off because it's plastic. It's going to keep from ruining anything or scratching anything. Little dab of grease here. Line her up all around and let that seal soak up all that grease. Yeah, could feel the difference in the forks immediately. Now we just got to get everything put back together, get that tire back on, all the fairings back on. All right, time to reinstall this fork here. Of course, this guy wants to fight with you the whole time. Oh, went right in there just fine. We got our clip-on going on just fine. We're binding a little bit here, but that's okay. Ah! All right. And it's actually staying up there, which is cool. What we want to do here is measure once again our height. Make sure where we are, make sure we're at what we want. Just right there. Tighten this guy down so it doesn't move. We will be loosening those to tighten our forks. I do have all the torque specs for all of this. Their speed and ease of use. I'm just gonna run these things down. I would be careful with running them down because they are only, I believe, a 17 foot-pound. So I'm just gonna barely let them clamp on. There we go. I'm gonna do the same on this side, just run them down. And we can go back to these top clamps here, and we're just gonna loosen them up. All right, so these top bolts, they're only 17 foot-pounds. There we go, so it'd probably be easier to get the bike to lock. And obviously it is little to no pressure. That is it, guys. Those are tight. These here lower bracket pinch bolts, they are also a 17 millimeter. Not too much. And you really don't want to overdo these, and the main reason is there's plenty of clamping force in these. And the last thing we want to do is ruin our fork tube. So there's those two. I'll get the other two on the other side. The other two clamp bolts, like I said, a 17 millimeter, which is very, very little. Hence, when you install them with a hex key or whatever you're installing them with, you be very careful as to not over tighten them before you even get there with the torque wrench. It is not much at all. And that's why we haven't installed our clip-ons yet, because we need the room. Now the next thing to line up is going to be our clip-ons here, and you see we can raise them all the way up because they came with these bolts. It makes it so much easier to make your clip-on in the perfect position, which is awesome. And those were a 5 millimeter. So we'll go ahead and run them all the way up. And now we can go back to our top triple tree clamp and just tighten it up. And do the exact same thing on this side. So no way to mess up the angle, which is cool, of your clip-ons. Alright, do those nice and light. So these are 9.5, which is obviously not much at all. So we'll go ahead and get those done. And we want to do these before the pinch bolts. Alright, our upper triple tree bolts are a 19 foot-pounds. There's one. Get the other one done. And last thing to torque would be these lower, which is all the way up to a 24 foot-pound for these guys. There we go. We can put our little plastic hex bolt covers back in so they don't collect water and start to rust on us. So that is pretty much it, really. I mean, our horn wire is still bouncing around. I don't even know if I care to zip tie that thing back on. Go ahead and put this guy back in here. Remember, you got to put it on forward and then slide it back into place. We have a 4mm hex key that goes into the plastic part of the fairing at the bottom. We got to pop these pins out so that the nipple's sticking up. Make sure you line it up real well. Slide those into play, pop them in. Get the other side. This guy forward. Make sure it's in its little rail system and slide it back. Pop the pins out, put them back in. Got 3 of these push pins. And this 4mm here on the side. Make sure it still has that plastic washer. Last few things to do, guys, is to put these little metal washers back in. So there's one. That was way harder than it should be. All right, guys, that about wraps it up. It was a pretty easy project. I actually thought it was gonna be a lot harder than it was. It turned out to be really, really easy. I think that it was fairly noticeable that we got a little more return, a slower return, which is exactly what I was looking for. So now hopefully I can get this thing out on a track, or at least get it back out. Ha, forgot to put that back on. All right, but hopefully I can get this thing back on the road here and start messing with it before I get to the track to make sure I kind of like its rebound. Hopefully that this 10 weight will have gotten the job done. I'm not gonna go ahead and finish installing the tire for you guys because there's really no point in that. I already have a really, really good video on removing and reinstalling a tire, and I'll post that here. So thanks again for hanging out with me, guys. Hopefully this was helpful, and I'll see you next week. Bye.